Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Science of Breaking Bad by Dave Trumbore and Donna Nelson. Read by Tom Perkins and Tiffany Morgan. This is a story about a man who transforms himself from Mr. Chips into Scarface. Vince Gilligan. Forward. Breaking Bad is not about meth. It's about greed. About the way greed transforms a humble chemistry teacher into a merciless drug lord. By watching the show, nobody will learn how to make methamphetamine. They might, however, learn a few things about human nature, the rough road to domination, and the destructive power of absolute power. Yes, I just used power twice in a sentence, but what do I know? I'm just a chemist. And so is Dr. Donna Nelson, a professor of chemistry at the University of Oklahoma and former president of the American Chemical Society. She was instrumental in helping the show's creative team present spectacular and slightly wrong methamphetamine synthesis processes. That's right, some of you might have figured out already, the hard way, that Breaking Bad is not a how-to-make-meth guide, and neither is The Science of Breaking Bad, the brainchild of talented pop science writer Dave Trumbore, who co-authored the book with Dr. Nelson. The duo lead us through a catalog of science-related moments found throughout the 5 seasons of the series, and yes, there is a lot of chemistry in this book. The explanations come in both simple terms, Section 101 in each chapter, and more advanced descriptions. The reader also gets bonus content such as trivia and side reactions, side RXN, worthy scientific observations extracted from various episodes. Even addicted viewers will discover something interesting. Take the original opening credits as an example. Many have figured out that 35 and 56 are the atomic numbers of bromine, Br, and barium, Ba, respectively, and that the mysterious C10H15N represents the chemical formula of methamphetamine. But how about the meaning of the number 149.24? Take a guess. A, the molecular weight of methamphetamine, B, the water temperature at Bogdan's car wash, or C, Bryan Cranston's weight at the end of the show. Yes, you guessed right. There is more in this book than science. Dr. Nelson describes a few elements of her experience as a science consultant for Breaking Bad, from getting in touch with the production to advising the writers. She and I share an admiration for Vince Gilligan, the creator of what is arguably one of the best shows in television history. In my case, the admiration started on a fateful Albuquerque afternoon when, after a serendipitous yet lengthy discussion, Vince decided to give my eyebrows a chance. And what a ride it was! I learned a lot and made good friends. Even today, when Bogdan the car wash owner is walking the streets of Chicago, people stop him to chat or take pictures. Some know that the bushy eyebrows guy who gave virtual life to the character is a scientist by profession, and some don't, and don't care. Now, here is a word of caution. Before Breaking Bad yourself, carefully read this book to get your red and white phosphorus right. Or send me a message. After all, I have a Ph.D. in chemistry. And it's chemistry, bitch. Dr. Marius Stan.
From Dr. Donna Nelson. My first exposure to Breaking Bad came from an article in Chemical and Engineering News. In this article, Vince Gilligan, the producer of Breaking Bad, was interviewed during Season 1. My eye was caught by the article's photo of the lead character Walter White standing in the desert, wearing only underwear, shoes and socks, and a lab apron, not lab apparel commonly seen. Upon reading the article closely, I noted a statement by Vince, "We welcome constructive comments from a chemically inclined audience." This was an opportunity we had anticipated for a long time. Interested parties from the scientific community to the U.S. Congress had discussed the goal of influencing a primetime television show based on science as a way to increase the public interest in science. We couldn't see how to have such influence, but now it was being suggested by a Hollywood producer. But I hesitated because of the show's connection with illicit drugs. I worried that connection could be damaging to my academic reputation. I had carefully ensured it was well known that I had no connection with anything illegal in order to serve as a proper role model to my students. I initially dismissed the producer's invitation to weigh in. Then, losing this unique opportunity gnawed at me. It probably would never come again. I decided to test my assumption that Breaking Bad might present illicit drugs as positive. There were only 5 episodes of the show existing at that time, so I carefully watched them all. I saw that each portrayed illegal activity that was eventually punished. The show was ultimately moral. Then I felt more comfortable with the show, sufficiently comfortable to offer to help. However, I still had more worries. I knew that sometimes people made statements for the sake of appearance, with no intention of following through. Also, I had no way to contact Vince. So, I contacted the reporter who authored the C&EN story, asking if she thought Vince was serious. She didn't know. She had not thought of the statement as an opportunity for us to influence Hollywood and its messages to the public. However, I knew she had his contact information. I asked if she was willing to communicate to him that I volunteered to help with the science. The C&EN article stated that Breaking Bad had no funds to hire a science advisor, so I knew I wouldn't be paid, but it was still a fabulous opportunity to serve the scientific community. The reporter said she would contact them, and about 1 week later, I received a phone call in my office. It was a Breaking Bad representative asking if it was true that I would help them. I said yes. Then she asked if I ever made it out to Burbank, California. I knew they had no funds to support my travel, so how I answered would have a large impact on whether the collaboration moved forward. Therefore, even though I hadn't been to Burbank, I replied, "Oh, all the time." And she said, "Great. The next time you're in town, come by to meet us." And with that, our collaboration started.
1. Meet Walter White. My name is Walter Hartwell White. I live at 308 Negra Arroyo Lane, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87104. To all law enforcement entities, this is not an admission of guilt. I am speaking to my family now. Walter White, Breaking Bad, Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot. On January 20th, 2008, AMC introduced its newest TV drama series in the following manner. A pair of khaki pants, still belted, floats through the air and lands on a dusty road somewhere in the desert wilderness of the American Southwest. The pants are soon run over by a recreational vehicle being driven recklessly by a middle-aged white man wearing only his wedding ring, underwear, and a full-face respirator. His passenger, also wearing a face mask, is passed out in the front seat. Inside the RV's main compartment, bodies of 2 men slide back and forth across the chemical-slicked floor as laboratory glassware shatters around them. The RV crashes, the driver stumbles out, and once he composes himself, he records a video message for his family in the unfortunate event that he doesn't make it home alive. The man, now known to the audience as Walter White, then aims a gun down the road as sirens approach. Cut to the show title card. The 1 million or so viewers who tuned in to watch this episode at the time had questions. Who exactly was Walter White? Why was the guy from Malcolm in the Middle standing in the desert in his underwear? What exactly were we watching? This was Breaking Bad, the brainchild of Vince Gilligan, then a 2-time Emmy nominee for his role as producer, writer, director on the smash hit sci-fi series The X-Files, who also had 3 feature film scripts under his belt. His vision for Breaking Bad was built around a narrative little seen on network or even cable TV up until that point. Rather than create a likable protagonist who could stay morally and philosophically static year after year and season after season, Gilligan wanted to take Mr. Chips and turn him into Scarface, to paraphrase his go-to description. He envisioned a man who would turn away from his otherwise normal life, a man who would break bad and commit to a life of crime, specifically the illicit manufacturing of methamphetamine. That man, the same man standing in his underwear in the pilot episode, was Bryan Cranston. He would soon leave his earlier role of immature father figure Hal Wilkerson from Malcolm in the Middle in the New Mexico dust in order to take on the role of Walter White, a mild-mannered high school chemistry teacher who sets out on the path to becoming the notorious drug kingpin known only as Heisenberg. But in the real world, neither Gilligan nor Cranston were scientists, much less chemists, and neither were any of the show's writers. So how on earth did they expect to pull off such an ambitious story in a convincing way? During the inaugural episode of the excellent Breaking Bad Insider podcast, hosted by the show's editor Kelly Dixon and creator Vince Gilligan, Gilligan himself stressed the importance of getting the science right. "I'm no chemist. I never took chemistry in high school. I kinda wish that I had, except that I don't think I'd like it as much now if I did. There's something beautiful about math and science because there are right or wrong answers. And then the rest of life, as we all know, everything's just a big gray area. None of my writers, actually, is a chemist. None of them know anything more about chemistry than I do. We have Kate Powers. We have a wonderful researcher in Jennifer Hutchison. We have Dr. Donna Nelson at the University of Oklahoma, who's helped us out a great deal. We had a DEA chemist who happened to be on a break from work who came and visited us on set. They didn't show us how to make meth, but they told us when we were technically wrong because we wanted to get this right." Gilligan's commitment to bringing real-world science to Breaking Bad was commendable, but it was also a smart creative decision that helped the show to stand out from the pack. As the show's popularity and its ratings climbed over the years, it became very apparent that audiences were fascinated by Walt's mastery of science and were curious to know more about his explosive experiments and meth-making machinations. So, in addition to the slew of episode recaps and reviews that sprang up across entertainment news websites, magazines, and podcasts, there was also an uptick in the coverage of the show's science. One such fact-checking article was my own 2013 effort for Collider.com titled "The Science of Breaking Bad." As you might have guessed, that article ultimately led to the writing of this book, which offers a much deeper dive into the show's excellent grasp of scientific concepts. The only issue with offering a portrayal of actual scientific processes in a show like Breaking Bad, which features illicit meth-making, malicious use of explosives, and gruesome methods of evidence disposal, to name a few, is that ne'er-do-wells might get the idea that they know enough just by watching the show to become their own Heisenberg. While it should go without saying that the laws of the land trump both the possibilities of fiction and the practicalities of science, consider this our disclaimer. None of the information in this book is intended to be used in an illicit, illegal, or ill-advised manner. And as Gilligan and the creative team behind Breaking Bad had already figured out, simply watching the show probably wouldn't get you very far anyway. As Gilligan put it, "I don't want people leaving this show knowing how to make meth. We never wanted this to be a how-to about making ricin or meth or any of this stuff. It's a story of a transformation from a good guy to a bad guy." This is all to say that Breaking Bad is a fictional show with a basis in real-world science that was tightly scripted, controlled, and produced with all necessary legal and safety precautions put into place. Viewers only get to see the sexy side of the production without all the camera trickery and special effects work that goes into it later. Breaking Bad is not a how-to guide, and neither is The Science of Breaking Bad. This book is intended to give fans of the show a deeper knowledge of the real-world science on display throughout, to clarify just how close the TV science comes to reality, and to reveal the great lengths that the show's creative team went to in order to get it right. The writers of Breaking Bad employed staff researchers like Jen Carroll, Kate Powers, Gordon Smith, and Jennifer Hutchison to run down the nitty-gritty details of the science they'd be delving into. The writers also spoke to a number of experts, including Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, agents, DEA senior chemist Victor Bravenik, whose name was given to the thoracic surgeon who removes Walt's lung tumor, radiation oncologist Dean Mastras, who happens to be writer-director George Mastras's brother, spokespersons for Narcotics Anonymous, the Albuquerque Police Department, the officers of the New Mexico State Police and their drug-sniffing dogs, AMC executive Brian Bockrath, who holds a degree in electrical engineering, and a retired freight rail hazmat safety specialist who basically wrote the book on the topic. Even Bogdan Wolonitz, the bushy-browed owner of the A1A car wash in the show, is actually a computational physicist and chemist by the name of Marius Stan, who is a senior scientist at the Argonne National Laboratory after having worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory. And, of course, the show's longtime science advisor and consultant, and this book's co-author, Dr. Donna Nelson, has been an integral part in establishing Breaking Bad's scientific literacy. As noted in the preface, Nelson came aboard the production as a volunteer after reading a chemistry-focused interview with Gilligan and Cranston in Chemical and Engineering News back in 2008, during the show's first season. In the article, they put the call out for scientists, especially chemists, to lend their expertise to the show. Dr. Nelson was the only person who followed up. It's a good thing she did. Dr. Nelson has been instrumental in helping the show's creative team lock down their organic chemistry and methamphetamine syntheses, along with proper precautions taken to keep the show from being a how-to guide, and even crunching numbers for dilution problems on the scale of freight train tanker cars. A professor of chemistry specializing in organic chemistry at the University of Oklahoma, Dr. Nelson is a Guggenheim Fellow and a Fulbright Scholar, and was the American Chemical Society president in 2016. I'm thrilled and honored, and honestly relieved, to say that she has fact-checked the science presented here and has graciously shared insider information and personal experiences from the show. Her anecdotes can be found throughout this book. Although the science of Breaking Bad is intended for fans of the show who have a curiosity or enthusiasm for science, I don't want to exclude science enthusiasts who might never have seen the show but have a passing curiosity for it. So allow me to introduce you to Walter White, a.k.a. Heisenberg. The pilot of Breaking Bad is still the best possible introduction to the show and its polarizing protagonist, but there are many moments scattered throughout the series that act as both science lessons and clever displays of Walter White's dual nature. Many of these are active, such as Walt's various MacGyver-like contraptions, rigging a DIY battery, preparing homemade explosives, cooking meth. But others are subtler. Take, for example, Walt's high school chemistry lesson on chirality in Season 1, Episode 2, Cats in the Bag. As Walt tells his students, chiral is derived from the Greek for hand, and is, fittingly, a description that's best illustrated by comparing the shape of your right hand versus that of your left hand. They're identical, yet opposite and non-superimposable. Basically, they're mirror images of each other. This trait also exists all the way down to the molecular level of matter. Walt, in a very telling bit of dialogue, says, "Although they may look the same, they don't always behave the same." It might not be apparent right away, but that line is an apt description of Walter White and his alter ego, Heisenberg. That is some stellar foreshadowing disguised as a science lesson. Breaking Bad does this better than anyone. But the lesson doesn't stop there. Walt goes on to use a concrete, if tragic, example of chirality, the drug thalidomide, used in the mid-20th century to prevent morning sickness in pregnant women. This particular version of the molecule's shape, known as an isomer, is the right-handed one, and it's perfectly safe. The left-handed isomer, however, can produce severe birth defects if taken. This is precisely what affected some 10,000 children across 46 countries in the 1950s and 60s. The scandal eventually strengthened regulations in organizations like the FDA, which required proven efficacy and disclosure of side effects for future drugs. It's a stark lesson on the nature of chirality, and one that provides the dark narrative undercurrent running throughout the series as a metaphor for the harmless Walter White and the deadly Heisenberg. They may look the same, but they certainly don't behave the same way. You might be wondering why Walt chose that name as an alias, even if you've already seen the series in its entirety. While Heisenberg works perfectly well as a pseudonym, it works doubly well when you understand that it's a reference to Werner Heisenberg, the 20th century German theoretical physicist and pioneer of quantum mechanics, for which he won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1932 at the age of only 31. His contributions to theories related to the atomic nucleus and subatomic particles, nuclear reactors, and nuclear weapons are certainly remarkable and worthy of their own separate study. But Heisenberg is best remembered for one thing: the uncertainty principle. This characteristic of quantum mechanics basically means that the closer you get to measuring the true position of a particle, the less sure you are about its momentum, and vice versa. In science, this is tricky enough, but in the world of Breaking Bad, it's downright dangerous. Walter White chooses this specific alias early on in part because it sounds badass, especially when paired with dark sunglasses and a black pork pie hat, but even more so because of its connotation. You might think you have Heisenberg pinned down, but that's when he'll blindside you with something unexpected and deadly. More to the point, the show's writers chose the name Heisenberg for both its dramatic and scientific value, and on the more morbid side of things because the scientist himself also battled cancer before passing away in 1976. The cast and crew have taken great pains to walk the walk and talk the talk of real-world chemists, physicists, and engineers. It's one of the many impressive features of Breaking Bad, and serves as the inspiration for this very book. In the following chapters, I'll lead you through an exhaustive list of scientific moments found throughout the 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, to explain them in both simple terms and using a little more advanced terminology. We'll be covering chemistry, biology, and physics as portrayed in Breaking Bad, and more specifically, we'll get into the subdivisions of each area of study, like meth-making, toxicology, and electromagnetism. This book is set up in such a way that you can read cover to cover, start to finish, or you can jump to the subsection that interests you most, though the 3 successive chemistry sections do build upon each other. Throughout the book, you'll also find bits of trivia under the Inside Breaking Bad heading, which aims to show the Hollywood side of the show's attempts to portray real-world science. The incredible talent assembled behind the scenes of Breaking Bad went to great lengths to get the science right, and greater lengths still to portray it in a safe but realistic manner on camera. I'd be remiss if I didn't call attention to those efforts. You'll also find the first of 15 bits of bonus content I like to call side reactions, shortened to Side RXN. These are worthy scientific observations seen throughout Breaking Bad that didn't quite fit in an overall chapter. Think of them as bite-sized portions of the show's science that you can consume in a single sitting. Their topics range from the chemical composition of the human body to zombie computers to what happens when balloons tangle with power lines. In other words, it's the extra fun stuff. But don't take my word for it. Check out the first one for yourself. Side reaction number 1, crystallography and synchrotrons. In another life before cancer, meth, and the assumption of the Heisenberg identity, Walter White was a brilliant co-founder of Gray Matter Technologies, along with fellow grad school colleague Elliot Schwartz. Schwartz is German for black. Black plus white equals gray. Walt sold his share for $5,000 only to watch the company go on to be valued at $2.16 billion, with a B. That fact irritates Walt from the show's premiere to its finale, growing from a regret to a grudge to a perceived injustice. The stark difference in how their lives turned out is laid bare when the Whites pay a visit to the Schwartzes' swanky mansion for a party in the appropriately titled episode Gray Matter. There, a former grad school research partner named Farley introduces Walt to some other party guests as a master of crystallography back in their Caltech days. Crystallographers seek to determine the arrangement of atoms in a crystalline solid, like a protein, through the use of X-rays along with neutron diffraction and electron diffraction. Think of the process as being like shining a flashlight beam onto an object in the dark to figure out exactly what it is. This is the same idea, just on a molecular scale. When the Caltech researchers were presented with a protein problem, Farley recalled, Walt had a one-word solution: synchrotrons. As Walt explained to the group in the episode, they generate purer and more complete patterns than X-ray beams. Data collection takes a fraction of the time. A synchrotron is a type of particle accelerator in which a beam of charged particles travels through a closed loop where it is steered and focused by electromagnets. This magnetic field is synced with the beam as it accelerates. CERN's Large Hadron Collider is the world's largest synchrotron-type accelerator. Synchrotron radiation is emitted during the acceleration process and is highly stable, of high intensity, and polarized, or focused, allowing for data collection that takes less time than using weaker X-ray sources. Walt got this one right. We'd expect no less from the man who contributed research toward a Nobel Prize in chemistry, though he wasn't awarded the prize himself. This perceived injustice not only gave Walt another reason to hold a grudge against his former partners, but also nudged him down the path toward becoming Heisenberg. Chemistry 1. It should come as no surprise that there are going to be a lot of chemistry discussions in this book, like a lot. It's the basis of Walt's career, whether we're talking about his days in gray matter technologies, his time as a high school chemistry teacher, or his drug empire business. It's also the fundamental science that runs parallel with the show's narrative. While molecules transform, elements decay, atoms break bonds, and electrons drive change, the same can be said for Walter White. His alter ego Heisenberg slowly takes over to become his default personality, or ground state. That's another term for the lowest energy state of an atom. See, we're learning chemistry already. If you've never taken a chemistry class in your life, don't fret. We're going to start out slowly and cover the basics. If you're an accomplished chemist with years of lab work and stacks of published papers to your name, I think you'll find something worthwhile in the following chapters simply because of how they tie into Breaking Bad. In the first chemistry section, I'll be revisiting Breaking Bad's famous opening credits sequence, which uses the highly recognizable periodic table of elements as a clever way to introduce the show's title, cast, and crew. There's a lot more going on here than just elemental symbols and a now iconic color scheme. Next, we'll play with fire, not literally, of course, we'll leave that to the professionals. But Walt's fiery demonstration of colored flames in his chemistry class is a colorful way of explaining how to excite electrons and get them to put on a show. The third and final subsection gets a little more dangerous. It's where we start to break bad for real. I'll take a look at Walt's deadly phosphine gas concoction to see just how vile the vapors really are.
From Dr. Donna Nelson. I enjoyed my set visits to Albuquerque. It is interesting that the show was originally supposed to take place in Riverside, California, but it was moved to Albuquerque when New Mexico gave a 25% tax rebate to film production. During my first set visit in Albuquerque, Breaking Bad's producer Vince Gilligan asked a question about using chemical symbols in the opening credits, which was very important to the show. He mentioned that they wanted to use the symbol D in one of the names listed in the credits, but he had been told that there was no element that had that symbol. He asked me if that was correct. I replied that it was, but that if he wished to be creative, he could use the symbol for deuterium, an isotope of hydrogen. I also mentioned at that time that there is another isotope of hydrogen, which is named tritium, which has the symbol T, so he could use that in the credits also. He said he would keep this information.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?